good to hear from you. And
Yes,
see you.
brother. Yes. I'm doing well, alhamdulillah. I'm doing well.
Alhamdulillah.
Brother,
Excellent.
Dr. Shariff, assalamu alaikum. Good to see you too.
Walaikum salam. Yes, as I just told Brother Jawad, after the first Dr. Abdullah, the rest of it is Shariff. I'm one of the family here.
Alhamdulillah. Okay.
Yes,
Very good.
Yeah.
Imam El-Amin, though, I will call you Imam El-Amin all the way through. I cannot do otherwise. So,
Yes.
you have no option there. So,
SubhanAllah.
but I was mentioning, I think we're going to get started really quickly, but I was mentioning to Brother Shariff that I set out 8 questions, and a lot of them are broad, and we're probably not going to get to all 8. And if there's an intermingling of the questions, I'll just change them up a little bit as we go. But your experience and what you've done in that community, and it resonates a lot with the type of things that we're trying to do and broadcast in this episode right here. Obviously, we can't get to everything. We have about an hour, 15 minutes, but feel free to go back and forth with Brother Shariff, and pull from your experience, whatever you want. Don't feel restricted to the questions and trying to get to the end. We want to hear from both of you. That's what we want. Okay. I'm gonna message Sahar to start the. Okay. All right. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to MET's Healing and Unifying the Public Square and Reclaiming Our Beloved Narrative. MET has set out a 5-part webinar series to discuss a lot of the issues, many of the issues that are affecting us as Muslims, us as citizens, us as people in this country, or people anywhere of goodwill, who want to understand what's going on, what are we doing, what can we be doing, what should we be doing, historical connections, future connections, and much more. So today, we are honored to have 2 guests with us. Our first guest is Dr. Shariff Abdullah, and I'm going to briefly give you his bio, and he can introduce himself, and then I will introduce our second guest, Imam El-Amin, and I'll briefly give his bio, and then we'll get into the questions. Dr. Shariff Abdullah is a consultant, author, and advocate for mindfulness, inclusivity, and societal transformation. Shariff's meta vision and mission are simple. We can create a world that works for all beings. Shariff promotes heart-centered inclusivity, compassionate dialogue, and a society based on vision. His vision and work are informed by his inclusive spiritual practices, his growing up with racism and generational poverty, his legal background as a successful attorney, and his inclusivity experiences in over 120 distinct cultures spanning 45 different countries. He is a consultant and trainer. He has consulted with hundreds of organizations and has trained thousands of executives and managers in the skills and techniques of inclusivity and authentic, effective leadership. He's also a wisdom teacher and inspirational speaker with a message. Shariff has been a sought-after presenter for consciousness and human potential organizations, as well as several international forums. As an author, he has written several paradigm-shifting books, including The Power of One, Authentic Leadership in Turbulent Times, the award-winning Creating a World That Works for All, 7 Seeds for a New Society, Practicing Inclusivity, and the Chronicles of the Upheavals. Welcome, Dr. Abdullah. It's great to have you here with us.
Thank you. Salaam alaikum. And when you read that list like that, I feel tired. I actually did all that. Okay. but forums like this give me a lot of energy and strength. So I'm looking forward to it. So thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And thank you for being here with us. And we are proud to have our other guests here tonight, and that is Imam Makram El-Amin. He is currently the Imam of Masjid An-Nur in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he's led a fast-growing, culturally diverse congregation in his hometown to the forefront of interfaith dialogue and neighborhood outreach. A 2014 Bush Fellow recipient, Imam El-Amin imagines a new narrative of Muslim life and leadership, one that has at its core a vision for social change and justice. As spiritual advisor to Keith Ellison, the first Muslim elected to Congress, Imam El-Amin has offered general counsel to the Minnesota congressman on religious and global issues and has accompanied him on international trade trips. He was a 2012 American Muslim Civic Leadership Institute Fellow at the University of Southern California, studying the intersections of faith and civic life, and was recently appointed a chaplain for the Minneapolis Police Department. For more than 2 decades, Imam El-Amin's work as a religious and community leader has been firmly rooted in the principles of human dignity and social justice. A teacher and facilitator, Imam El-Amin has led his masjid's numerous community service initiatives, including Al-Ma'un, neighborly needs community outreach services, feeding more than 500 families monthly. His North Minneapolis masjid is home to more than 200 families from around the world and has, in many ways, served as catalyst for Imam El-Amin to partner with some of Minnesota's most prominent religious, social, and corporate institutions on issues of affordable housing, immigration, employment, and education. When not leading his congregation, Imam El-Amin, a certified life coach, continues to mentor adult men transitioning from prison into the workforce. Imam El-Amin has represented Muslim Americans in the United Kingdom, Turkey, and the Middle East. He's a longtime member of the Minneapolis Multi-Faith Network and serves on the advisory board of the Muslim Christian Dialogue Center at the University of St. Thomas, where most recently he was a lead participant in Pathways to Faith, a 5-part series on interfaith dialogue. A student of the late religious leader and scholar Imam Warid-Din Muhammad, Imam El-Amin's moderate approach to Islam has afforded him opportunity to share the stage with Bishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama. He attended a historic interfaith event in Rome with the late Pope John Paul II, and has traveled to the Holy Land as a member of interfaith clergy delegations, respected by all. Welcome, Imam El-Amin, to the Muslim Educational Trust webinar on healing and unifying the public square.
Thank you, my dear brother. It's an honor to be a part of this forum and to share the platform with such an esteemed Dr. Shariff. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Imam, for making this time to be with us. And for the audience, we have a set of questions for both our distinguished guests. And we're trying to create a free-flowing dialogue. And for both our guests today, feel free to elaborate, bring up examples from your past and your work, because it's vitally important to what we're doing. So I'm going to start off with the first question that we have. Both of you have impressive track records and experiences in conflict resolution, working with diverse groups, as we mentioned in the bios, with Shariff, Brother Shariff, working in 45 different countries, and Imam El-Amin working with so many different groups and bringing them together in Minnesota. We currently find ourselves living in a fractured country. What do you feel is the most important thing for all parties involved to understand about finding equitable long-term solutions to address systemic injustice? If you could share some stories from your work, that would also be great, but feel free to answer the questions how you see fit. Imam El-Amin, we'll start with you.
Yes, so I think that's a excellent question. I think it is a question that could take the whole time of our session, to be honest with you. To be honest, but I will say that I think there's just a couple things that resonates in my mind with that question, and the one is the need to hear one another, to hear each other. I think that there is an element in today's society that can make us tone deaf to one another. It can make us be I would say just numb and ambivalent in many ways to the struggle of each other, whether it's on lines of race or religion or socioeconomic status or whatever you name the category. We have these moments that seem to be more frequent where there's just not a willingness to listen and to hear one another. So I think that's one of the real key elements in the idea of creating spaces where we can both express but also to hear. and do it in a way that allows each other to really tell our truths. And I say that that in any meaningful dialogue or resolution or mediation that I've been a part of, there's a certain that I mean, if in fact someone has been aggrieved, there's a certain rawness, I would say, to the conversation, and that makes for it to be authentic. I mean, it's someone who is speaking from a position of being hurt or even perceived to have been hurt or injured in some way, and it requires and it challenges the other to really just to listen and to understand that even in their their most I would call it in their most innocent self, if they didn't even realize what they were doing, it's still an effect that happened to someone else. And I think that that is some of the things that we're seeing, across really racial lines or socioeconomic lines and so on. I mean, there's this an inability, an unwillingness to listen to one another. I think that's first. I think the other thing is that, the idea of these languages and this systemic racism and white supremacy and religious bigotry and all these things are so daunting. I mean, when you use that terminology, that makes the problem so big. It's like a big monster, right? It's a super big monster, right? And I'm always a proponent of leaning in where you're at. So you have a situation where you have a situation where you may be in close contact with people of a different race or a different religious. I mean, I'm saying there's always work that any of us can do. And I say, look at where you're passionate. Look at the things that you do that's really second nature to you. That God has given you that innate ability to write or to speak or to interact, whatever it may be for you, and you use that gift. You have to use that gift in that moment to help lift up someone else who you have to recognize that has been hurt. I was on a call earlier today, around some issues of sexual violence in the community, in the Muslim community, right? Very touchy subject, very touchy subject. And it was being led by a group of women scholars and activists in the community. And as a man who, as an Imam, but also a man, understanding that this was a problem, and I recognize it as being a problem. My listen was to be quiet. I needed to be quiet. I need to listen. I need to hear. I needed to be able to hear their pain and understand where they were coming from. Though I'm not a perpetrator. I haven't done these sorts of things, but that's not the point. The point is allowing someone to share in this way. And I think that, regardless of what the issue might be, that's just something that's in real time that happened to me earlier today. But I'm saying the idea, we need to be able to hear each other, and when others need to be able to speak their authentic truth, that's where this begins. But there's many other strategies to say, but those are the two things that really resonate with me in this moment.
Thank you so much for that answer, Imam El-Amin. And I'm going to come back to some of the things you mentioned a little bit later on, because we want to get your insight into the tremendous work that you've done in such a diverse community to get multiple sides talking to each other, as you mentioned, listening to each other, when sometimes that conversation oftentimes begins dead on arrival, and the conversation doesn't even begin. So thank you for that, Imam El-Amin.
Sure.
Brother Shariff.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting hour, because he basically, I felt like he was like looking down at my screen at my notes. This is, yeah, I fully agree with all that he was saying. I think that it's very important for us to understand the problem, and I think that right now we're not understanding it. We have to understand that things like racism, oppression, I'm glad you brought in sexism, etc., is endemic in our society. It's living right here. But these are just the presenting symptoms of something that's a lot larger and goes a lot deeper. And so it's possible to stop at the presenting symptom and be doing all this work at this level and not get down to the source and not get down to what the real problem is. And that problem is something that I call spiritual starvation. I refer to that in my book, Creating a World That Works for All. That if I am starved, I don't know how to act like a true human being. And if I'm starved, I will do things that I think are feeding me, but what it actually does is feed my starvation. There's a phrase in the Quran that talks about people being deaf, dumb, and blind. And we've created a society of the deaf, dumb, and blind. We've created a society where the entire society is experiencing spiritual starvation, and all the information that they're getting in feeds that starvation. All the news, all the entertainment, all the drugs, all the alcohol just keeps feeding that starvation. And so finally you get to the point where you can actually elect a president who is spiritually starved, okay? Who acts out of that starvation and thinks that that's actually a good idea. So my work is to shift this picture, okay? So is to not say, oh, don't think about racism, or don't think about sexism, or don't think about oppression. It's think about it the right way. There's something that's lying down there for you, for all of us, okay? And if I get to that thing that's down there and learn how to truly feed the hunger for the sacred, having the hunger for the sacred is a really good, I think, a good idea. It's like having hunger for food. You really need to eat every once in a while. But if you don't know how to get fed, you wind up making that hunger worse. I want to give you a really quick example of this. As a consultant, I get called in to, I have a reputation for impossible situations. It's like, we have no idea what to do. We can't fix this at all. Let's call Shariff. So this is in a city in the Pacific Northwest. And in their public works department, they had a work crew that was regularly and routinely referring to the one ethnic person on the job by racist, derogatory language, and doing this over the course of a solid year. And so this guy sues, and the city, in its wisdom, settled immediately. It's like, just, we're going to put a 1 on this check and just tell me how many zeros to fill in to make you happy, So they were going to fire the crew, just fire everybody. And that's something I don't recommend. They called me in, and I said I don't want to work with them. And so I had a dozen men in the room with me, and they were pissed. They didn't want to hear me. They didn't want to hear anything. They thought they didn't see it. They were adamant that they didn't do anything wrong, and that's why the mayor and the city manager and everybody else wants us to fire them. So I had them for 4 hours, and at the end of the 4 hours, they said, 11 of the 12 said, "We see what we did wrong. We see the effect that it had. We are committing to not doing this anymore. And we're committing to this set of behaviors we came up with in the room and when things like this come up." And so 11 of the 12 got it. And that has lasted. This has been like 3 or 4 years ago. I check in with them every 6 months, and I check in with the operations manager and the city manager, and I said, you know, how are they? And he said, they're model workers now. They are respecting not just the Black workers, not just the ethnic workers. They're respecting all of them, and they're actually respecting themselves. The operation manager said, "What did you have them drink when they were in the room?" Because it's like, how could you do this in 4 hours? Now, I never used the word racism. I never used oppression. I didn't use that. The thing that I got them to do was to look at how are they a human being on this planet today? You know, what is it that they were calling forth? How are they in the world? And once I got them to start seeing where they were starved and how to feed themselves, they could adopt a completely different strategy, a completely different outlook on life. Now, until you do that, you can tell them to say these words or don't say these words, or, you know, in terms of the sexism stuff, don't do this, don't touch this woman that way, don't look this way. You can do all that and you still haven't arrived at the core. So my thing is drill down to the core. Whatever the core is, you're going to find spiritual starvation down there, and find ways that you can help them feed themselves.
Right. That's a very interesting outcome that happened after that, and that points back to what Imam El-Amin was saying, and your story and your experience here resonates that it's not just the words that were there or abstract concepts that we make some sort of meaning for it, but an actual conversation and people listening. My next question, and whoever wants to answer first can answer first. In the Quran, Allah Most High says, in the closest meaning, surely Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves. As we're all aware, there's a call and great groundswell for this country to examine and re-examine itself, its roots, its foundations, its systems, to change for the better. What do you feel are the three most important, or maybe we might have it one based on the answers that you guys are giving so far, but we'll see, the three most important institutional or governmental changes. And the next question after that is going to be the three most important personal changes. But I think maybe we'll start off with one for institutional governmental change that what you see is the most important. And then we'll do the same question, ask the same question, but at the individual level. So Dr. or Brother Shariff, we'll start with you on this one.
Oh, I want to go second. I saw a man getting straightened up there. Okay, yeah, go for it.
I had to write down spiritual starvation because I got to revisit that. I got to go back and revisit. I was looking for something to write with here, but that verse from the Quran that you just referenced is such a powerful verse for self-actualization, and really the idea that that we, through the grace and mercy of God, have our destinies in our own hands. And so the idea that I can change, I can do that. It is possible. It is possible. Sometimes what happens is we begin to accept, the abuse, the hurt, whatever is in society, whether it's racism, you put the ism on the back of it, right? Or whatever it is, you begin to accept it as being just kind of normal, how it is, right? And this speaks directly to that this is undressing that. This is peeling that back is what it's doing, right? And it's essentially what it's doing is saying that you have the ability, you already have the power, if you will, that to make the change. It's within you. It's not something that has to come from an external situation to you. It's something that perhaps it's asleep. Perhaps it's not awake. Perhaps you have pushed it down so it's very, very dormant and it's not pricking your conscience. Perhaps that, but know for certain that the change that we say we want, the change that our souls want, right, is within our very capacity to do that. Okay. So now pivoting to your question about institution, the idea is, I mean, when we think about, from an institutional standpoint, from a governmental standpoint, and things of that nature, I think that the first, there's a recognition that has to happen that another saying of Muhammad the Prophet, peace be upon him, he would say that to want what your brother or sister what you want for yourself, right? So you have things, from a policy or institution standpoint of just based on just equality, that if I have it for me, then I advocated for someone else. So I mean, so there's no situation where I can have and enjoy healthcare. Let's take. I can't say that I want and deserve healthcare, but my neighbor does not have healthcare or access to healthcare, right? At the same, so I think that these are things as far as leveling the playing field. And in some ways, people, we got these lightning rod words. We have one of them is Democrat or Republican, or you have independent, or you have socialism, and all these things that they carry so much baggage with them. But functionally, if we just peel back and just take off the terms and look at how they function, we all are in and out of these spaces all day long, no matter what it is. So we need to kind of quiet that a little bit, right? It's always easier to categorize and then a point like they are the problem over there. It's very easy like that, but not really wanting to own up to this. So my point about all this is to say that there are certain things that I believe that people have demonized. And one of those things, politically speaking, is where anything that advocates leveling the playing field, anything that levels the playing field, right? So you have a situation to where that you have it because you deserve it. They don't have it because they haven't worked hard enough for it, right? And it's a recognition of none of the institutional, systemic kinds of things that block, hinder, provide counter narrative, because some of it is that we feel other people aren't deserving. That's the reason we call people by other names. That's why you call Black youth, you call them a thug, right? As opposed to calling them a human being. Because if I call you a thug, that means that in my mind, I have rationalized in my mind a way that I can treat you or mistreat you in a way because I put you in that box. I mean, it's like, you're going overseas, we're at war with someone or we're invading someone, whatever the case, however you want to call it, and instead of talking about them as a father, a mother, a child, you call them an insurgent, right? And you use language that allows you to do what you want to do from a mistreatment standpoint and be justified, right? So I think it's really about this idea of leveling the playing field. So, I mean, there's many, many policies. There are many, many things that I would do, but from a systemic standpoint, I would almost argue that we would need to have the second part of your question first, right? The idea from an individual standpoint, right? Because that's really what it's going to be. So, I mean, and listen, let's not kid ourselves here, right? There's no way for any of us to divorce ourselves from our identity while we occupy or play a certain role. There's no way for that to happen. That would be, Doctor, you made this know this better than me, that would be some level of schizophrenia or something, right? The idea that I'm going to separate my identity, my values, my moral convictions or whatever, I'm gonna set those aside. Now I'm gonna do this work for the people or for the, no. How do we do that? How do we do that? So I think that really we have to go through the individual standpoint and then to the institutions or the things that we stand up. The last thing I'd say on this issue is that, I think that, I think there are varying strategies. I think one of the things that we do is that while it might seem too complex, too messy to deal with the individuals on this kind of other. So one of the things that we do, we'll try to jump to policy or jump to institutions, right? We'll do that. And that the greatest thing that we can hope for in that scenario is to not have things that hinder other people, not have things that hinder me. So I'm saying that you don't have to believe that I'm equal to you in your own personal life, but don't set up systems that keep me back. You know what I mean? Don't set up things that keep me back. Don't set up oppression that, don't redline me. Don't make my insurance higher in this area. Don't lend in my community and allow others who are not from my community to come and establish businesses and stores and buy homes and do it. That's gentrification. That's how that stuff happens. But that has a historical perspective. It's those kinds of things. So these things are very difficult. I mean, you asked a beautiful question and you parsed it out very nicely. But functionally, it's hard to do that. It's functionally very, very hard to do that. And so much I want to say on that, but I'm going to pause. I'm going to give way to the good doctor and let him educate us a bit. But I think that I find it very difficult to separate those things because they're really a reflection of one another. The individual and then the institution. So,
thank you for that answer, Imam El-Amin. And this is the reason why we wanted both of you on this, because this type of, analysis and the way that we acknowledge the fact that there are no simple answers, the way people give simple answers, just do this. Obviously, someone who's worked in this area, such as you have, Imam, and Dr. Abdullah, you have, it's obviously not an easy answer, and there's very many shades and grays here.
Certainly.
In different ways that we can do it, and which obviously one of these questions, both of you could go on for hours, but we really wanted to have these out there, and then as the conversation evolves, and as we'll see in the next month, 2 months, 1 year, 2 year, these things to be brought up. Brother Abdullah, Brother Shariff, your comments.
Yes, I am so glad I went second. Because again, I can just say, yeah, I agree with all of that. So the one point I would really like to emphasize is the point of our destiny is in our hands. When I started out life, God gave me a set of cards to play. And the cards that I got were very different from the cards everybody else got. Well, no different from everybody else in Camden, New Jersey. But, on welfare, public housing, when National Public Radio went looking for the worst high school in America, they went to my alma mater. And just kind of the casual racist, kind of brutality, the brutality of trying to live your life in that environment. And I could be sitting in Camden right now using drugs and blaming somebody else for the hand that I got.
Yeah.
And the answer isn't what cards did you get? The answer is how did you play them? And if you sit back and say, well, I didn't get $1 million and I didn't get a pony when I was young, then what you wind up doing is continuing and perpetrating your own internalized injustice. And so, like Imam El-Amin, I also believe that we have to start not at the institutional level, but at the personal level, and actually below the level of personality into the level of consciousness, into the level of my own spirit. And I had to answer these questions for myself personally. I then had to answer these questions for my community, for my family, and then I can get to the point of saying, how does this work for my society? And these are my 6 questions. Number 1, who are you? And most of us stop right there. we take some externality, we accept that externality, and we don't go any further. So, I'm Black, I'm an African American, I'm a man, I'm from the Northeast, I speak English, and I don't go any further than that. but you have to drill down into, number one, who are you? Number two, what do you want? Not what does the media tell you that you want, but what is it that's lying in your heart that you want? Number three, what is your service? How are you of service to yourself, your family, the world, etc.? Number four, what is your path to happiness? How do you become happy? Now, for most people, it's, again, an externality. I'm going to drink this wine. I'm going to shoot this dope. I'm going to go out and party. Or I'm going to make $1 million. I'm going to buy a Maserati. I'm going to da da da. And the question, though, is, does any of that stuff make you happy? And the answer is no. I can choose to be happy with it. I can also choose to be happy without it.
Mhm.
Number five, what do you love? And again, we don't answer that question. We're told you should love this, you should love that, you should love the other. And then my last question in terms of looking at and clarifying of my own consciousness is, how do you exercise your love in the public square? To use the language of our forum today. And I think that's very powerful language. It's much more personal than society. It's not talking about society or talking about the nation or anything like that. It's like, yeah, we all have access to this public square. We all bring to it exactly who we are, whatever we are. We bring to the public square our needs. Back when I was going to school in Boston, I go to Boston Commons. Well, Boston Commons was where people would bring their sheep to for their sheep to graze. So I didn't have any sheep. So the how I act and how I interact in the public square, how I exercise my love for myself, my love for my immediate intimates, my love for my community, my love for the earth. How I do that reflects back to who I am, and also reflects forward to who I will be in my future. So when I'm in the public square, I have a responsibility, as Brother El-Amin said, to not hinder other people, not stop their sheep from grazing. Yeah, I have to recognize that. Let's say this one last thing. Okay, you're right. We could have just done one question and had 2 hours and be done with it. I'm going to be talking about this in a webinar on Wednesday, and it's actually a free webinar. And at the end, there'll be some links for it. There's still a couple of spaces left in it. I think that a lot of times, especially when we're talking about the Black community here in America, we're not looking at my responsibility to answer those questions. What people wind up saying is, to the white community, is, I want you to treat me better than I treat myself. That's a losing proposition. It just doesn't work, okay? I have to hold myself in high regard. And as I'm holding myself in high regard, I can then ask others to hold me in high regard. I can't do that while I'm doing the very behavior that I'm complaining about. That level of that, yeah. And yes, I do have a degree in psychology, and yes, it is called schizophrenia.
Right.
So,
right.
but yeah, so I think that we need to get us right first, and then we help everybody else get us right.
If I could just say, I mean, first of all, these questions I think are outstanding. And I wrote them as you were saying them. These are, I consider this the deep work. This is deep work, right? You're pulling us into the deep water right now when you're talking like that, right? And I appreciate that, and I think that we all need to have these conversations with ourselves, asking ourselves these questions, because if we authentically go deep on those things, then the way we show up in the world changes. I mean, instantaneous. It begins to just change, one soul at a time, one human being at a time, right? So I think that that's very important. And also this idea of just taking personal responsibility for ourselves, our situation. It's no one's job to make me happy and make me whole and all. Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of things within our tradition that would support a lot of that. I'm also thinking about the story of it's in the tradition of Muhammad, peace be upon him, where he talks about how God showed the angels his creation as he had made it, and allowed them to look upon the creation before the human person, if you would, right? And he said, and they responded to him and saying, "My Lord, how could anyone go wrong in a world made like this?" And then instantaneously, this is my words now, it's like he's kind of switched the screens, and then showed them the world after Satan has influenced the world. And their response is, "My Lord, how can anyone go right in a world made like this?" Right? So what this said to me is that the world in which we live is misleading. It can really mislead us in many ways, right? And it can influence us. It does influence us. And while I think at the end of the day, personal responsibility wins, that it wins, but there's a great influence on us as far as the environment that helps to mold us, shape us, and so on. You spoke about your beginnings in New Jersey, and how there were many things, elements that if we just look statistically, I mean, you're a miracle today, right? You're a walking miracle just based on the circumstance that you come out of, because like I know, there are a lot of people to your left and to your right that succumb to certain things and certain vices and so on and so forth, right? And I think that that's one of those things of how we need to help folks navigate that idea of, yes, it's about me and taking personal responsibility and how I do this here, but also not negating the fact that there are these external things that shape how we perceive and how we view the world as well. And I think that a lot of these things, I think, are detrimental to particular people of color and other things, because most of what we're seeing does not show us in the best light. It does not show us in a more favorable light. And I would argue, but I defer to you because your background in education. I would refer to you to say that, if you took any people and substituted our history and put them in our place and put us in their place, I would argue that the end result would be the same. It would be the same, because this isn't a thing that is unique to us as individuals, right? It's something that this is the human condition. And when the human condition is put under these kinds of conditions, I would say, the human being put under these kinds of conditions, then this is the kind of things that we get. I was a part of the chaplaincy for the Minneapolis Police Department for a number of years, and I had many conversations with officers and whatnot and folks in law enforcement, and we talked about these sorts of things, and people were baffled at the activity, the behavior, and so on and so forth. But really and truly, I had to challenge them in many ways and say, listen, if you understood the conditions that precipitated this, that led into these things, then these things become less a mystery to you, less of and they almost become predictable. And I think that that's part of the scheme. Honestly, I really do. Right. So I just think that there are just so many different things that are intermingled into these conversations that we have to be mindful of that. And then the last thing I would say is that and how we project out, right, outwardly, right? So whatever we want to say, white supremacy and institutional racism, systemic racism, all these things, all these isms, right? You cannot, I'll argue with anyone, you cannot, have breathe the air of white supremacy, drink the water of white supremacy, attended the institutions of white supremacy, created your life, built your life upon the rubrics of white supremacy. You could not have done all these things and don't think that you are not affected by that. You cannot, that's just mind-boggling to even rationalize. I mean, so the idea that I'm not a person telling me that they don't see color, or they're not racist, or they're not this, or they're not that. There's no way that I said, have you been here? Have you been experiences that there's no way. That's a person that has blinders on, and some of it is just ignorance in the best sense of that, where they really don't know, or it's willful ignorance. They don't want to know. They don't want to know, right? So you have these things that also show up in these spaces that I think that, and how white supremacy has made the African American, the black man, the scapegoat for all these different things is all part of the scheme. But I tell my brothers and sisters from all over the world, particularly in the Muslim community, I say, listen, many of you have come here and you don't understand even the pathway that allowed you to come here. You look at civil rights, you look at all the gains on the through the struggle of African Americans that have really created a pathway for that to happen. And I think that's a truth that needs to be told, because that's a fact. That's not make believe or anything. That's an actual fact that allow others to come in. And what also we have to say is, because this social racial construct that we live in is so powerful. It's such a powerful tool, so powerful that they reinforce it through systems and institutions. It's very, very powerful that to think that you're not affected, that's also something that it says you have a blind spot. You have a huge blind spot. And I think that that's some of the inner work that we're finding within the Muslim community right now. And I tell them, you didn't create white supremacy. I'm not, I know that, right? Mm-hmm. But many have benefited from it. Yeah. They benefited from it. Either how they engage and enter the society, the access that they have that others don't have, and the silence being complicit in many of these things as well too, because Islam calls us to be just and to stand firmly for justice, as I think that even if it be against your own self or those close to you, right? So clearly there's a prescription. It's not all about those over there. It's also about what's inside of here, as our good doctor was telling us as well. So I know I went on a little bit of a rant there, but these things, these are very passionate conversations that we have, because in many places and spaces, we're battling literally with those who have these ideas and really can't understand the experience of what people have gone through, and still to come out and be standing up upright. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, I mean, it's a miracle, like our doctor, a miracle.
Yeah. Imam El-Amin, those are the type of responses why we had you to come on to this program, this webinar series, and thank you for that. We can move on, or if
no. Please allow me to expand a little bit.
Sure.
I see the same people talking about I don't see color. I'm colorblind, or I don't have a racist bone in my body, and I then respond, it must be all that racist cartilage then, because there's something going on. Okay, now, but I think that what they're saying, and again, for some of them, it's just a matter of avoidance and denial. But for some folks, I think that what they're saying is what I say with regard to being a man raised in a sexist society. Okay, so I've been breathing the air, I've been drinking the water, and therefore it has seeped into my sexism has seeped into my being.
Yes.
Now, I work hard and diligently to control that, to eliminate that from my being, to work with my daughters and now my grandsons to have that not part of their being. I am very both happy and proud of the work that I've done in these regards,
Mm.
and it's also still there.
Yes.
Okay, so and I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm not going to kind of, oh, I'm so sorry because it's like, no, this is the energy that we're in.
Mhm.
When it comes up, I'm going to deal with it. If it comes up again, as it comes up again, I'm going to deal with it again. So that's my relationship to being a man in a sexist society.
Mhm.
So being a white person in a racist society is exactly the same. You
Mm.
don't, it's as for all the work that you've done, I applaud you, but it's still a part of your DNA.
Mhm.
Okay, don't feel bad about it. Don't beat yourself up. But when it comes up, deal with it. Okay. As I tell everybody, especially my white friends, I've actually in my life I've met two white people that were raised in America that I honestly and sincerely believe did not were not affected by racism.
Hmm.
Two. Now, I meet thousands and tens of thousands of white people in this society, and I met two, and one of them is dead. Okay, so it's okay. Get over it.
Mhm.
A book I'll mention is Wendell Berry's book called The Hidden Wound. It's a book where Wendell Berry talks about how racism negatively affects white people. He said, if Black people receive this wound, white people receive the mirror image of this wound and are constantly wounding themselves because they can't admit to it. They can't get to the point that this is something that actually damages them. Okay, one quick story, then we can get to at least one more question. And that is something that happened when I was in law school. Okay, and how my fellow students saw me. My grades were such and my LSAT scores were such that I could go to any college that I wanted to, period. Okay. And I chose Boston University. And the other students there, because I'm Black, were in two different camps. One camp was, oh, you just got in here because you're Black. You don't really deserve to be here. You shouldn't. You're taking up a space from a white student, a deserving white student, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The second camp was, you don't really belong here. You don't deserve to be here. But because we're liberals, we're going to help you. We're going to help. We're going to help you carry your books. You're going to, maybe read the Dick and Jane primer to you or something like that, because we want to help people like you. Okay. And virtually no one would accept me just like the rest of them. It's like, my scores were higher than yours. That's how I got in here, and it creates this defensiveness. It's kind of like, I don't want either one of these things. I don't want you to be my ally. Okay. I mean, this whole thing about allyship, which is the latest fad,
Yeah.
our fad language here. I want you to be a straight up, true human being. And when it's time for me to get supported, you'll support me. When it's time for me to support you, I'll support you, okay? And we can stop this thing. You're weak, and I'm going to be your ally to help you get strong. That means that you're not looking at me. You're not really seeing who's in front of you, and so both of these groups are not seeing the being that is sitting right in front of them. When we start drilling down and asking those questions, who are you, what do you want, etc., we can then start seeing like, oh, wait a minute, we're all the same person. Wait a minute, we all want the same thing. We all have the same needs, and those needs may or may not be getting addressed. And when we get to that point, I think some things that's the picture in which things can actually start to change.
Mm. Mm.
Thank you for that answer and this conversation. I know we're running up against time, about 5 o'clock, and we thought we'd take some questions at that point, but I have some other questions here. Maybe they have to be a part 2 or part 4 or part 5, however many we can get through.
Just keep going.
All right, we can keep on going there.
Yeah. I got my cup of coffee here, so yeah, just keep going.
Okay. I want to go to a question that's been on a lot of people's mind, and I'm sure you, Imam El-Amin, have been part of this, and you alluded to it a little bit. But one of the questions that we have seen in other webinars or in other workshops that we've done or things that we've hosted, people have asked, what is the Muslim community's role in combating systemic racism, when sometimes there are many intersectionalities in that Muslim community itself, which may be the target of racism and Islamophobia and bigotry and xenophobia itself. There seems to be some confusion about that. There's some camps that say, you're not doing enough. There's another camp that says, no, we're allies. We're not the ones that should be blamed. And then there's a mixture of those things. How do you see this, El-Amin, Imam El-Amin? Because I'm going to start with you. And then you have worked in this area and brought people together. What is that the Muslim community needs to be doing right now, or should be doing, or is already doing?
Sure. I think it's a very important question, a very timely question. And yes, these are the topic of conversations, in real time within the Muslim community for sure. But according to my colleagues, they're happening all over the country right now as well. So right. I'm aware of that. I would say this. I would say that there's no, right time to be a Muslim or not. You know what I mean? There's no it's not time, now it's time for us to lean in and do these kinds of, no, this is who we are. This is one of these identities that we have, that we carry, that we lead with, right? So if we're going to do this and be authentic, there is I think the recipe, if you will, the blueprint, I put it that way, the blueprint is there in Islam to really undo a lot of these systems that we have, right? A lot of these things that plaguing us and so on. I believe that wholeheartedly. I believe that. I believe that in the same way that many years ago, Malcolm acknowledged that, and other people have acknowledged that throughout the course of time. I believe that, right? The issue is not about, is there a blueprint? Is there a roadmap? No, it's not about, can we? It's about will to do. It's about the will to do, right? So I think that, again, I think that part of the work we as leaders in the Muslim community do, many others, practitioners or what have you, is, we comfort the afflicted. We're here to provide help and support for those who have been hurt and aggrieved, and those who have, suffered from abuses, whatever they might be. Part of this is of what we do. It's part of what we do. It's part of what we sign up for, and really in this way, right? But the other flip side of that is to afflict the comfortable as well, right? So the idea is that for those who have become complacent, those who are benefiting those who are benefiting by this, they're less frontal about it. They don't want to be vocal and be, really truly engaged. So they get silent. They're running high. They have, we're on certain groups, WhatsApp groups and whatnot. And then when this issue comes up of racism or anti-Blackness within the Muslim community, because we have such a diverse group in there, I mean, it's almost like silence. You know what I mean? But Trump will institute the Muslim ban, we got all kinds of activity that's going on. You know what I mean? Because it's easy for us to point when it's like out over there, but we have to look internal. Then those are touch points that really hurt us, right? And I'm saying we will not be the community that I think God is calling us to do unless we take these challenges head on. We have to take these challenges head on, right? And I think that this is part of the issue that we're seeing, right? So, so how do we do that? I think that we go, just like our doctor alluded to a moment ago, this starts firstly on an individual level. On an individual level, that if you have a practice that you know to be offensive, that if it was said in mixed company in the presence of others, and you know that you have a way of speaking or acting or behaving that will be offensive, then it's on you. You got to stop. You have to stop before I say, hey, you're offending me. No, you need to stop that. You need to self-correct those kinds of things and so on. And if it's not you, but it's in those in close proximity, your family, could be parents, children, extend whoever else, then you have to be the one to call that out and be consistent with that. They should feel uncomfortable perpetuating these ideas and stereotypes and racist ideas. And I'm talking about in Muslim circles. Why? Because God calls us to be witnesses. He calls us to be witnesses for humanity so that the messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam can be a witness for us, right? So the issue is that it's not can Islam make headway into all these racist and systemic racism pressure? Is there a world map? That's not even the question. The issue is, are we going to have this moral fortitude and the backbone to really stand up and be what God is calling us to in the Quran and in the life example of Muhammad, peace be upon him? I think that's a squarely something that's right before us. And the last thing, and I'll give way to the doctor, I would say this. Many times when we reread scripture and we read the stories of scripture, whether it's the story of Noah building the ark and the people who mocked at him and so on and so forth, the story of Moses and Musa, and how he, had the Pharaoh chased him, the sea parted, and all these things, these wonderful stories and things that we have that are really, many of them are parables for life as well, right? Right, but we read all these things. Most often, we imagine ourselves in the story. If you really get into it, we imagine ourselves to be those that I would have been helping Noah build the ark. I would have been in that group. Or I would have been the one with Moses. We would have been fleeing from Pharaoh, right? Or I wouldn't have been the Ad or the Thamud or all these other people. I would have been with the prophets and messengers and so on, right? We imagine ourselves to be in that group because we want to feel good about ourselves.
Right. And even in modern day,
Imam
El-Amin, and even in modern day.
Yes, but somebody was in that other group. Someone was in that other group. That means somebody made a choice. They made a choice, and their choice bears out in this moment. That choice bears out that they were on the wrong side of history. They were on the wrong side of history. I'm saying the Muslim community has to take a position today. And they have to ask themselves the question, will we choose to be on the right side of history? Or will we remain complicit and quiet and end up on the wrong side of history? Because history is going to bear this. We're going to talk about this time, the incident with George Floyd, because I was right here in my city, in Minneapolis. The incident of George Floyd will be one of those historical things that we talk about, like we talk about Emmett Till. And we talk about others in this community, the people who, we're going to talk about it in that same light, that same vein. And to the point where you're going to say, where were you when George Floyd was killed? Where were you? You're going to be able to mark that time in history. And the issue is going to say, and what did you do? And what did you do? So I think that this is a heightened time for the Muslim community to stand up and to be Muslim and to be human in this moment, to be human in this moment, right? And so much I can say about that, right? So much I can say, but what I'm saying is this, is that we're at a tipping point in the Muslim community. And when I say tipping point, man, I mean, it's a critical moment for us. And so critical that you know, the choices that we make and the alliances that we build or not will either bring us closer together, or perhaps have schisms that will be almost, you know, irreparable, you know, irreparable, right? You can't work back off of them, or there won't be the will to do that even, you know, because people are saying, look, when it was time for people to stand up, to speak, and don't do me a favor. I'm not asking you to do me a favor. I'm asking you to live your religion. What would Muhammad, peace be upon him, what would he have done? What would he have said? We know that because he said it. We have that. So the issue is, are we going to step into that? Are we going to really and truly do that, right? And I would say, listen, you know, we may have to have another session to talk about ways and strategies, because I believe that there are. I think that there's strategies and tactics about which we can do that. And I welcome a larger conversation around that. But I think this point, this is a crossroads for the Muslim community, particularly here in America, And I think that only history will tell whether we make the right choice or the wrong choice.
Well, that's a powerful answer, Imam El-Amin, and it's really striking what you say, because we see it in all forms in modern history too. You know, if I were there in Nazi Germany, if I were there in wherever, but yet we still allow people and governments and countries to continue, because we see what happens with the Rohingya, we see what happens in China, sure. And people will say, you know, if I were there, I wouldn't be the people there who were, taking people out of their homes and having a trial for them without giving them I wouldn't be one of those people. But then we see this, you know, we get that test, and then there's the place where we have to step up and set up our institutions and fight for what our religion says. And as you said, there was this blueprint in this multicultural community of Muhammad, yes. Peace and blessings be upon him. And we forget that. And we need to continue to remind ourselves and then put those things into action, as you mentioned.
But and it wasn't always easy. It wasn't always easy. You know, no. I mean, so we like to romanticize that sometimes, but the history says it wasn't. I mean, this was a work in progress, but it was something that he insisted on it because the Quran insisted on it, and therefore it began to reverberate throughout the community. So I just want to park that, but please go to our dear doctor here.
Absolutely. But the Shariff.
I don't have anything substantive to add, with one exception. I've been using the metaphor of the caterpillar and the butterfly as a metaphor for the transformation of our times. The metamorphosis between a caterpillar and a butterfly is complete. But a caterpillar looks nothing like a butterfly. It doesn't function like a butterfly. One of my favorite cartoons is these two caterpillars on a leaf, and they're looking up at this butterfly. And one of the caterpillars says to another one, "You'll never get me up in one of those things." So it's like, yes, you will, because it's an inevitable process.
That's right.
And so right now, as we're watching the dissolution of our society, we're watching our society literally dissolving. What we need to be doing is asking the question, what's the butterfly that comes next? And that's the challenge that we've got. to be holding and not be complaining about the caterpillar because it's dying anyway. It's not dying, it's transforming. What we need to be looking at is transforming to what and how do we begin to fly? That's what I'd like to leave us thinking about.
Wonderful, beautiful.
Where is it that we start to fly?
Sure. Beautiful.
I was just taking note about the butterfly and the caterpillar metaphor analogy, and I really like that. I'm going to ask one last question, and then we can see if we have some questions from the audience. And it's always the question that we like to end off with in the webinar to make up for any deficiencies that we have on our end. And what is one question that I have not asked, or it's not on here, that part of the 7 or 8 questions? What's a question I haven't asked that you believe I should have asked? And then what is the answer to that question?
Let me go first this time.
Okay.
In the last question, I wasn't going to say this, but I think that in your last question, you have to predicate the question with which Muslim community. Okay, because there are lots and lots of different ones with different agendas, with different focal points, with different things that they stress, and just so I do a bit of interfaith work, and when someone calls and says, "I'd like you to speak at my church or speak at my Buddhist congregation or whatever," my first question is, "Who are you?" And are you someone who holds the goal, the focus of we can create a world that works for all beings? If you do, then I'm working with you. And if you say, I'm creating a world that only works for me and my group and everybody else is going to have to go to hell, okay, bye. And I it's not that I don't believe you, it's just that I'm too busy creating this other world right over here. So that would be something that I think there's a Chinese statement saying that the person who says that something is impossible shouldn't interrupt the person who's doing it. Okay, so our job is to do the impossible. It's like, okay, so let's get to it and let's do it.
I would say, and I think the only reason that maybe it hadn't been asked is just surely because I'm extremely long-winded about these conversations, and so I didn't allow you to get in.
It makes my job easier.
I didn't allow you to get in another question.
Both of you.
But I would say this. I would say, one of the questions is, what are some practical steps that we can do to begin to get at these oppressions on multiple levels in our communities, right? So I would say this. I would say, first of all, start local. Start local, all right? So wherever you may be, if you're in, Portland, or if you're in New Jersey, or if we're in Minneapolis, or wherever we may be, right? So I'm saying that if you find yourselves with a level of privilege, right? I have privilege, right? So the fact of the matter is, doing the uprisings here in Minneapolis, that closed down a number of businesses, and one of the major grocery store chains right in North Minneapolis, where I live and work and pray, right here, right, has still been closed since the uprisings. It's over a month now, almost nearly 2 months is going on, right? It's been closed. So that has created an extreme food desert in my community, extreme food desert, right? But I have, through the extension of our organization, I have access to food. Right? So what do I do in this moment? I use my privilege, the status of where I am and what I can leverage. I use that to affect those who are adversely affected by right around me, right? So we feed the hungry. We do a lot of things to help with basic needs and all the services, etc. Right? I mean, you may be a doctor, you may be a medical doctor, But you know, in the African American community or communities of color, we have disproportionate health disparities. We have that. But you're a doctor, you're a physician. You're a physician. I'm saying you need to connect in communities that are adverse, have the adverse effect of your particular discipline, and you need to administer to them. You need to make it your business to do that. You might be a teacher, an educator, right? And the education system in this country, they say it's broken. It's not broken. It's working, it's serving those who it was intended to serve. It's just not people who look like me. It's just not people who look like me. But if you're an educator and you know this, if you're an educator and you know this, then your job is to set up tutorial programs and help kids with reading proficiency, literacy, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of things you do locally, and I'm saying lean in where your proficiency. I had a friend of mine who's also an attorney who came to me. He said, Makram, he says, we're good friends. I know we know each other's family. He said, look, I'm a white guy. And I do well. I do well for myself and my family and so on and so forth. We're not hurting in any kind of way. I said, but I'm also appalled at what I'm seeing, what I've come to understand about what's going on and so on. What can I do? I said, listen, you're a lawyer. You're passionate about the law. You love the law. Yes, I love the law. Well, my community has had a bad experience with the legal system. My community has suffered because of lack of being able to afford good representation. We got the people who plea bargain and accept and say they're guilty to things they haven't done because they don't have the money and they're just sitting in jail and so on and so. There's a plethora of issues. I'm saying ramp up a service that will help people in my community or in communities of color based on where you're already operating. You know it's not fair. You know that. You can tell me that. Well, now it's time for you to do something about it. Now it's time for you to lean in and do something about these things. And each of us in our own respective cities, you can find programs, efforts, enough need wherever you are locally to make these things happen. I believe we are obligated to do that. We're obligated to do that. If we're not, again, we're making a choice. We're making a choice then. And, spiritually, when God gives us these gifts, that he gives us. And he gives us for it to be a use for humanity. But if we don't use the gifts where they're needed most, when we can, when we're able to do it, that same gift that we've benefited from in this life, your education, your status, your whatever, will also be the thing that will be the curse. It will be a curse for you. So I think that spiritually, we need to make certain that we're using all of our gifts to help those who need them most. That's I think a strategy and tactic that we should be using in our cities across the country to really affect change. Not try to we want to dismantle white supremacy. No, you say, how you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
It's actually interesting, and Imam El-Amin, you were prescient, and someone actually asked that question about what is it that we should be doing. Yes. When you mentioned in your previous answer and comment about getting into the practicalities and the tactics, the question was asked, what are the specific tactics and methodologies that we can do? And this was one of the audience questions. If you want to elaborate any more on that.
I think, quite frankly, I think that, I don't want to be too prescriptive in this moment, right? I want to leave it to those who are in your areas to do what you can. But all I'm just saying, as a rule or a principle, I'm just saying, wherever you have privilege, if it's education, if it's wealth, if it's information, whatever you have, I'm saying, on the other side, there's the you have the privilege and you have those who are not privileged, right? You have on the other side. I'm saying use your privilege to help those who are adverse on the other side of the fence. Use your privilege in that way. And I think if we do that, we will begin to try to level the playing field in our own local areas while we're fighting the bigger fight. While we're fighting this bigger fight. But if we talk about dismantling, we have these, I was on a panel, they're talking about dismantling white supremacy. I mean, where do we start?
Mhm.
Where do we start? It's in every single thing. It's in everything. Even when it comes to food and food insecurity, there's a level of there's a reason those things are like that. That's the area that I work in. I work in affordable housing, food insecurity. I work in employment services, and we also do mentoring. In each of these areas, there's an element of systemic barriers towards people becoming successful. So I'm saying that's where we should start. That's my opinion.
Okay. Imam El-Amin and Brother Shariff, we have over 1,600 people currently watching. There's a lot of praise coming in for both of you and what you're providing, because the type of dialogue the both of you are getting into is not really heard in the mainstream. You have to get into, find the specific niches, because the things are very broad in general, but the things that you're touching on have not been. And I want to thank you for that. And it's being very much appreciated by our audience out there. Brother Shariff, is there something that you would like to close with? Comments, anything else that you would like to add?
Yes, can we go another hour or two? No, when Brother El-Amin mentioned privilege, it's something that strikes close to my heart, because on the one hand, you could look at me and say, I'm from an underprivileged background.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you could truly look at me and say, there are immense privileges here.
Mm-hmm.
And I choose to focus. I make a choice to focus on the gifts that I've been given. And I've been given a lot of gifts. And there are times when I'm actually overwhelmed by being able to be who I am. Okay. One other point, and this is something that I talk about in some of my workshops and some of my videos, is what I call the 12 global challenges. Food insecurity is one of the 12 global challenges.
Yeah.
And the global challenges are truly global. Everybody in the world faces this, although the way we face it is different for each of us. And unless we're looking at all of them, I know some folks, I've got these blinders on, and the blinders say the environment or climate change. The blinders say racism. The blinders say, we need to take off the blinders. We need to start asking the questions of the heart, so that we can then form a society of the heart, a society that answers that highest yearning that we've got, and doesn't succumb to immediate fad thinking, or doesn't succumb to soundbite actions. Like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take a knee, I'm going to say a name, it's like this, like, okay, you did all that. Now let's go deep, let's get beyond that, and let's get to the point that we can help each other and help ourselves become true human beings. So that's my, and I really thank you for providing the expertise. I thank Brother Wajdi in the background for all of his help and all of his energy in pulling us all together.
Yes, thank you.
And I look forward to doing this again at some point in time. This has been great.
Absolutely.
I would love to. I concur. It would be my pleasure to do this and to join you.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you so much. Brother Shariff, we have an Imam El-Amin on multiple different platforms: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Zoom, 1,600 people watching. And
Wow.
they've been
Wonderful.
captivated by what you guys, both you brothers have said. And this content is much needed. And we thank you for that. Brother Shariff will be posting some links to books and webinars and other information. So that will be in our Zoom links right there. And Brother Shariff, you can go ahead if you want to put that there, and people can come to that. Imam El-Amin, if there's a last comment that you want to mention as well, go ahead. Otherwise, I will sign off for tonight.
I'm putting in the chat box just our website. People can be a little more familiar with some of the work we're doing on the ground and a way to contact us. I mean, I'd love to further this conversation. I just think we're in an important time right now, and I want to be available to respond and to others, especially if those are really ready to roll up their sleeves and do some of this hard, deep work. You'll find a comrade in arms in me. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Imam El-Amin, and please post that information in the chat links. And Brother Shariff is posting all the information there. That'll be there for you. This will also be posted on MET's YouTube channel, and people can watch it again, and we can post the information there as well. For those of you who are watching at home, wherever you are, thank you so much for tuning in. This is MET's webinar series, Healing and Unifying the Public Square, reclaiming our beloved narrative for our beloved community, and working on the things that will get her closer to our mission as people of faith, people of goodwill. And MET remains at the forefront of that here in the Portland metro community, and then hopefully nationally as well with our partners from Minnesota, from New York, Texas, California, wherever the people are that you're watching. Please support MET's work. You can go to metpdx.org, and you can donate to MET to support programs such as this program that we have, Healing and Unifying in the Public Square. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you to both our guests. And then we will see you next time, inshallah. Salam.
Inshallah.